We are building the infrastructure that the people that will be producing oil and gas will be using in the year 2040.
The general consumer, after a while, is going to raise their voice, and it's getting louder and louder at the moment. I'm optimistic when it comes to innovation. I believe we have a strong need, and I believe we're going to find a solution.
We need to educate the public that they're causing this whole issue of not having enough supply, and we need to develop technologies that will use less of that energy.
I think we have a great capacity to change, and I think we've demonstrated it over the centuries.
Every president since Dwight Eisenhower has said we're going to be energy independent within 10 years.
But we're going to wake up, and to our utter horror, the film's over. Full stop.
Welcome to World Energy Television and our third program in the 2007 series, The Balancing Act, leveraging current technology versus exploiting emerging technologies. I'm Roger Smith. You know, we're all a part of what is arguably the most technologically advanced industry in the world, but even with the energy business growing faster than ever, most end users would argue there's still not enough innovation. And most would agree that we've always been slow to adopt the latest technology. Now, as the focus shifts from discovery to recovery, technology has a bigger impact. After all, a barrel of oil not yet discovered remains in wait of technology to reveal it, while a barrel of oil produced inefficiently loses value that won't be regained. So if there ever were a time for exploiting emerging technology, this is it. And that fact makes life all the more difficult for the senior executive. On one shoulder sit the shareholders asking whether a high-tech investment is in the best interest of the bottom line. On the other are the end users, clamoring for new and better technology to do their jobs more efficiently. That's a real balancing act. Let's turn to our guests for their perspective on this important issue. Joining me in the studio today are Bruce Crager, the President and CEO of INTEC Engineering; John Gibson, President and CEO of Paradigm; Neville Henry, Chief Exploration Officer of Buccaneer Resources, and Neville is also a former head of international exploration for Anadarko; and Andrew Willis, the Director of Energy Technology Risk for Protiviti. Joining us via a live feed, Tom Fry, Executive Director of NOIA, also known as NOIA, the National Ocean Industries Association; Matt Simmons, the Chairman of Simmons & Company International; and Mike Bahorich, Apache Corporation's Executive Vice President for Exploration and Production Technology. We welcome all our guests, and let's get started with our discussion. Let's start with Matt Simmons as we ask him what Matt counts as current technology and what is emerging technology. And remember, we're looking for a definition. We're not looking for a list.
Great question. Current technology in the oil and gas and energy business is breakthrough, leading edge, cutting edge series of things that we began developing 3 decades ago. And it took a decade to invent, it took a decade to commercialize, it took a decade to spread around the world. And they're unbelievable in their impact of draining hydrocarbon far faster than we would have been able to drain hydrocarbon, and getting access in parts of the world for the last remaining easy oil that we couldn't find before, and basically that effectively led to peak oil. So it was important. But what it didn't do is what all of the experts thought it was going to do, is make oil easy to find. It just used up all the easy to find oil and then hard to find high quality oil.
John, do you agree with what Matt said about that?
Well, I'd probably lean more to what Rex Tillerson from ExxonMobil stated, and there never has been easy oil. So my definitions would be a little different. Current's what I'm using now. Emerging's what I'll be using over the next 2 to 5 years. And then there's basic research or future technology, which I would define as those things that we have not made an investment in today.
Matt, what would emerging technology be?
Emerging technology is all the stuff we haven't invented yet. The gap, though, between current leading edge technology and emerging technology is a blank blackboard. No people, no ideas other than just a few way beyond the horizon ideas. And yet the industry continues to talk, sort of doublespeak, about all this advances we're doing in technology, and a lot of things they're talking about we did 30 years ago.
Emerging technology, I mean, by definition, if it's emerging, it exists. And emerging technology would be the technology that is just coming out, and a few early adopters recognize the value of the technology, but the vast majority of potential users don't yet realize how beneficial it can be.
I think it's fabulous what we're doing today. But what we're doing today had nothing to do with what so many optimists kept saying it could do. We're not better defining reservoirs, for instance. We basically, the only way you define excellent reservoir detail is drilling multiple appraisal wells that you cut cores of and you flow test. We don't do that anymore. We have computers that can take assumptions and create pictures that are illusions.
Well, Matt, it's normal. You've made my blood pressure rise in calling the technology we use on computers illusionary. And so instead of an illusion, I would say that we have done a fantastic job in going from very small samples that are difficult to extrapolate to having a much more concrete understanding of the reservoir and its inhomogeneities and the anisotropic nature of the properties in the reservoir as a result of the technology. Is the technology as good as it should be? No. Have we improved risk in the oil field in terms of discoveries and improvement in production? Yes. Do we need to improve it more? Yes.
Neville?
Well, first of all, I think I'd take issue with the 30 years. I think that our industry has put effort in and has put to work many innovations. It goes back to our business basically built the computer business as we know it today. The aspects of miniaturization associated with creating seismic data that we used to do in the field. I remember in 1975, we were attempting to acquire live seismic in the field and actually have printouts of those data in the field in 1975, and ways in which we could then take those data and apply it immediately into additional new seismic lines in new areas, which had a high chance of being successful.
Okay, next up, a study by McKinsey & Company revealed that the oil and gas industry takes an average of 25 years longer than the consumer products sector to adopt new technologies. Why doesn't oil and gas adopt them quicker, and how much better off would we be if we did? Let's go to Tom. We want to hear what you have to say about that from NOIA's viewpoint.
Well, Roger, I may be the contrarian on this, but we're kind of a different industry from most. When you look at our needs for safety, to protect our workers, to protect our environment, you look at the standards that we create, you look at the regs that we have to follow, and then after going through all of those processes, having a product that is acceptable to most of the folks in the oil and gas community, that's going to take a while. I think that's a record we ought to be proud of. Rather than rushing safety, rushing protecting the environment, we ought to be doing the best we can to preserve those.
I do agree with Tom. I think that we have moved forward with technology in a safe and logical manner. We have to be careful with what we do. I do think we could do more, and one of the reasons that prevents us from that is that an individual project doesn't want to take the risk. And so until project risk is associated with a company that will try it and not put that burden on a project manager, it's unlikely to change.
Well, Bruce, I understand where you're coming from with that comment. I really believe that you get what you incentivize, and that's what we believe at Apache. And we often will partner with service companies to bring an important technology to bear on a problem that we have. One of the issues is that oftentimes the person in a company that is making the decision to deploy a particular technology is often that person may have specific numeric goals, number of barrels that person needs to find by the end of the year, et cetera. And sometimes there can be additional risk to that person by trying some new technology that may or may not work.